Hello, this is R Rats with Team 4545 League analyzing the game between Ant Mantis and Poison Pawn. This game was played in Team Event 53 in the 6th round. Let's have a look. Oh, by the way, Truxton is also making videos for Team 4545 League, and he's doing a wonderful job. I'm going to include a link to his video in the description here, so you may look at that as well. I haven't seen his yet, but I'm sure he's continuing to do a great job. Okay. This is an extremely interesting game because it discusses a very controversial line of opening theory, and we'll get that to the minute. Okay, White slow plays it with E3, shutting in this bishop, and I believe this is the position. I can't recall the name of this Russian or ex-Soviet grandmaster that came up with this line here, but this position had been known to be basically dead even and not much is going on, and this new move was introduced, I don't know when. Get to the most important game in just a moment, but it basically throws the whole opening tipsy-turvy because White gambits a pawn, and it looks like a move that you can't play. I mean, who's going to play a move like that? But it's got because you're just allowing knight takes pawn. But after the knight captures, White gets this has this incredible attacking potential after rook g1, and I believe it was 2001, maybe 2002. Kasparov played this line. I'm pretty sure it was this line against Deep Blue, and he had found a flaw in the computer's programming, and got this wonderful game against Deep Blue, and just turned its software upside down and destroyed it. But anyway. As I've made it clear before, it's my feeling that players under master strength shouldn't be playing a whole lot of deeply analyzed book lines. The main reason is how much time do you have for chess, and not everyone has a great deal of time. And what happens is the grandmasters play the lines, so therefore we feel, oh, we have to play these lines. But for the life of me, I can't figure the logic of spending 40 hours investing time in an opening that you may never play, and if you do play it, that you get this position after 25 book moves that you can't win from. If you're a decent player and on the rise, it's much better, I feel, to be playing something you're more comfortable with. Now, I'm not saying you can't score points by studying and playing book lines. Yes, you can, but your preparation has to be a lot, and you have to spend a lot of time doing it. But like I say, I'm not an expert on this. This is just my opinion, and I think you're better off if you're spending time analyzing your games and finding your strengths and weaknesses and working to improve on those. But like I say, I'm not the expert on this. This is just my opinion, and I do what works for me. Okay, and that's what I teach, is what works for me. Okay, so G4, and now Black declines the gambit. Now, once again, the purpose of this is not to try to analyze every possible variation out. Since G4 has been introduced, I'm sure there's a ton of theory on it, which I virtually know very little, haven't looked at anything. If I was suddenly faced with this position, I'd have to figure things out on my own, but that's fine. I can play book for a while and then find a reasonable plan from it. I may not find the best one, but I'll get a playable game as best I can. So I'm sure there's been a lot of published analysis on how to decline this gambit, and chances are that this is one of them. Now, I don't know when opening theory ends. I don't know. But I do know some of the ideas that come from this, and I think we have an interesting next several moves. And even though the gambit's declined, the game gets very intriguing. Okay, Bishop D3, White continues his development. And now this is an extremely interesting move. At first glance, it looks like it violates just about everything Black's trying to do here. But again, if Black's not careful, White's got some potential attacking chances here. Black can't just castle kingside because of G5, and we're going to grab a pawn with check. And Black's not developed on the queen side yet, and I'm not even sure if he wants to castle on the queen side. It's going to take him several moves to do it. The queen has to move, the bishop on c8 has to move, and it can't. Something's got to budge, the knight on d7 or the pawn on b7, and so Black's not anywhere close to getting safe here. But e5 has a lot of tactical implications to it. I'm playing a similar game. I have an online correspondence game going on where I played e5 in a similar type situation, and it has to do with the pressure on c4. Now let me just show you a sample line. I'm not saying this is the best line. White naturally doesn't have to cooperate, but the point is, if White plays that d takes e5, Black's going to come in with knight. Now Black comes in with knight f takes g4, and let's just assume for a moment White continues with rook g1, which was his plan initially. Now Black takes on e5 with his knight. Now there's some pressure on c4, and let's just assume for a moment that White continues with rook takes g7. Black's got some interesting possibilities here. He can take this pawn on c4. Now what's White going to do? He's got to deal with his bishop. It's doubly attacked. Let's just assume for a moment he takes here. Now suddenly, whoops, we've got a problem on f3. Sorry about that. Okay, White's going to have to deal with that first. I'm sorry, I missed these one movers. Okay, now we can get down to what we wanted to see. Okay, takes here. Now bishop takes h7, and suddenly there's this knight check, and White's either got to move his king and who knows what kind of trouble it could get into on f1. There's the bishop h3 check, or White can come back and take this, and suddenly Black's got this really nice passed pawn marching right down White's position, and White's got one piece attacking, and that's the rook on g7, and Black's got incredible diagonals open. His pieces are going to get developed. This h-file's open. Black's got to be much better here. So White doesn't have to be so cooperative, but I'm just illustrating the idea of e5, and this could be one of the resources that the theoreticians have come up with in declining the gambited pawn on g4, and it makes perfect sense. There's an old rule: how best to handle a wing attack, and that's play in the center, and that's exactly what Black is doing. Now, as I said at the outset, I said White doesn't have to be so cooperative, but we look at that line to show what Black's purpose was. The same way that when White offered the pawn on g4, even though Black didn't take it, we showed what White's purpose was. If knight takes g4, we're going to play rook g1, and then if knight back to f6, we're going to grab the pawn on g7. Okay, so let's see how White handles the tension in the center, and he takes this way. And Black comes up with a very reasonable move here. Again, I'm assuming this is probably theory. He takes here. Now he's got a shot on this knight on d3. Now, impulsively, the natural move that I'm going to want to play, if I'm, like, say, playing a blitz game, I think most of us would just naturally take back with the knight. Okay? That doesn't mean we all wouldn't. What White does is extremely interesting, too. He takes with the pawn, and this has a lot of purposes to it. It does expose the e-file. Both kings are exposed on the open file, but it's not clear that either side can take advantage of that. But the next thing it does is it gets this active or inactive bishop to, some line to move on. Now, unfortunately, what happens, White doesn't even move this bishop for the longest time, but we'll get to that. We'll get to that in a little bit. Okay, so before we go, let's just take note of something. Something I like to do in all my videos. Look at this. Look at that queen's rook and queen bishop. They've not moved. When are they going to get in play? They're critical to success. Okay, you got to get your pieces developed. Chess is war. If your men are on the back rank and not in action, and you're fighting with limited forces, you're going to lose. Okay. Don't know any other better way to explain it. Get them developed, guys. Okay. Now White castles, and Black's got a reasonable position here. He's just slightly behind in development. White's got his queen out and has castled. Black doesn't have his queen out and hasn't castled. And Black certainly can't castle here too easily because he castles right into check. Okay? Because White will grab that pawn on h7. But at the same time, Black's got some certain compensations in the position. This pawn on d4 is isolated, and black's got the ideal blockader. So naturally, the candidate move I'm going to consider right off the bat is knight from d7 to b6. I'd prefer that over f6 simply because there might be some tricks on with g5, and maybe white's weaknesses on the king side aren't all that weak because he's just gaining all kinds of board room that black can't deal with. So the logical candidate move is to keep the blockade of d5 going, and that's what black does. But at the same time, it comes at a little price. Black's moved to develop piece, and it thus has fallen slightly further behind on development. Okay. Again, both sides have 3 minor pieces developed, but white has castled and has his queen out, and it's white's move now. And white goes ahead and develops this rook, although it is developed on f1. In this position, white was the first one to seize that open line. Okay, so now black breaks the attack on the king by interposing his bishop, and this is fine. We don't need a lot of problems on the e-file. And then white takes this moment to seize that pawn on h7. It's probably too risky for black to give up all those pawns to win that bishop because his king is caught in the center. But black's not without play here. For instance, he can come ahead and take this pawn now, and that's exactly what he does. Now, finally, black's got his queenside getting going. He's got that problem bishop out. And let's stop and take stock here. Both side materials even. Black has 2 pawn islands. White now has 4. He's got 3 isolated pawns. Black has some potential winning chances here if he can make it to the ending, simply because white will have all those pawn weaknesses. Excuse me. Now, it doesn't mean that black's going to win. There's a whole middle game to play here. But for now, black is surviving. So what's black's plan here now? Well, we can try to castle queenside. It's probably not a bad choice. But to do so, we've got to get our queen developed first. We've got the rest of the back rank cleared. And where are we going to put the queen? And it is white's move, so white has some say-so here as to what's going to happen next. And he goes ahead and plays knight e5, and that's a perfectly good move. Now, what should black do? Well, one candidate move that's interesting is to play queen c8. It kind of avoids some of the complications that are coming. But the drawback with queen c8 is that it doesn't let black castle queenside. And there's other reasons why. Even if black could castle queenside, there's a fork on f7. But it takes away some of the pressure on f5. And the point would be if, on queen c8, if knight takes, which white's not going to cooperate with, we take on g4 with check, and then we can safely castle out of it. Here, I'll illustrate it. Like I say, we can play moves hoping for things. I call this hope chess, where we're hoping our opponent plays what we want him to play. We want white to take that bishop, and then well, we might even have a perpetual check here. Well, aside from that, the point I was trying to illustrate is that black can now castle. Oops, he can't. There's a trick. Well, I missed one movers. But anyway, we're getting closer. But like I said, there may be a perpetual check here. Do better than that. Win that piece, right? So, like I say, queen c8 is a hope chess move. Let's just go back to where we were. Okay, so what black played is perfectly logical too. It helps secure f7 a little bit, but black still has some problems here. He still can't get he can't castle kingside. It's illegal, and his queen is still in the way, and from castling queenside. So how does and it's white's move. So white's got to keep the pressure up. Otherwise, black's going to do exactly what I said he wants to do, and he's going to get castled. Bishop f5. Now, this is a interesting position. How's black going to handle it? One idea, again, is queen c8, but that gets in the way of black castling queenside. If you play queen d6, you might run into knight e4, gaining a tempo on the queen, and this knight gets into play. Because white does have a little lead in development here. So how's black going to handle this? He found a way, and it seems to work, because now he castles, and black's okay here. He's surviving. He's managed to put up with the onslaught by white, and black's got a reasonable game here, but he still has to play chess. Now on the queen side, black's winning. Got the isolated pawn blockaded, but the action's happening on the king side, and right now white's got a queen ahead on the king side, right? Just look at the position. Plus the white rook is better. It's wanting to come up to the third or fourth rank, and at some point get over to the H file. It'd be ideal on H3 if we can get it there, and try and checkmate poor black. And it is white's move, so he's got a chance now to show what he can do. He still has these problem guys here. There they are. Rook A1, rook on A1, bishop on C1. They're not in the game. They've got to get in the game. Black's got a couple guys to develop. They're not in the game yet. This rook, even it's developed there. Castling develops the rook. Sometimes, though, the rook is not well developed on F8. In this case, it is. It's securing the king, mainly F7. Okay, let's see what white does. Well, he brings another piece into play. So again, black's got to find an active plan here, and black goes ahead with one of my ideas that I mentioned. It's one of those hope chess moves. We're hoping white does what we want him to do, but naturally he isn't. But aside from queen c8, which he does, what are his other choices? Well, he can't. If he goes to c7, it doesn't really have a lot of hope there. It just frees d8 from the rook. But we're going to have to get this queen developed so we can get that rook developed. Okay, so he plays queen c8. And we're hoping white takes, but he's not. He's just going to play his queen to h5, which he does. But once again, black finds a good move, and he plays knight f6. Now he's getting pieces over to the king side where he needs them. And he can still maintain the blockade of the isolated pawn with knight from b6 to d5. Okay, so white's got to deal with his queen, and he does it by exchanging. And the exchange actually helps black a little bit, because that knight was just a little better posted than the counterpart that he just exchanged for. It had ideas of maybe going to g5, and who knows what's going to happen next. There's pressure on f7, and black is still fine here. And let's just stop and take stock. White has three weaknesses in the endgame: d4, f2, and h2. Those guys are problems if we get the ending. But white's still a little better developed. He's got his pieces pointed towards the king. He's still a queen ahead on the king side. Black hasn't maneuvered his queen over there yet. And it was at this point that white just goes ahead with his plan. He wants to try to checkmate black if he can. But there's still two problems in the white position, and there they are. When are those guys going to get involved? Okay, so rook e3, and this clearly what white's intent here is to play rook h3 and administer a checkmate on h8, and black's got to deal with this. Now white's consumed an awful lot of clock time, and black's got about a 4-to-1 time advantage here, and he did take his time on this move, but unfortunately he didn't play the right move. And let's just show what happened, and then we'll come back and reassess this. Okay, g6. Now, this is a good quiz point. White to play and do the best he can. Pause the video. Okay, you've returned. Did you see what white does? Yes, sack. And if black doesn't take, he's just given up a pawn and exposed his king any further, so white's going to have a decisive advantage here shortly. And now comes another check. Now maybe black has to try for king h8 here, because rook h3 is not possible, but I don't think it's going to work. We have queen G6 check, and then rook G3 check, and this, but nothing really helps. Then rook E7, and it's over. There's no defense to G7. Even throwing the rook away on F7 just delays made a move, and white played, or black played queen F5, and that just allowed a mate and won. Okay, let's go back and talk about how could black have saved this game, or could he? Okay, rook E3. Okay, what black needed to do, what do you do? Maybe this is another quiz. Pause the video. What do you do with black here? We know G6 lost. Okay, you resumed the video. Did you come up with bishop takes E5? Okay, now it gets rid of one of black's defenders, but it got rid of a white attacker for what that's worth. And what if white plays rook H3 immediately? Well, you have a resource here, and it's F6. It's called getting some flight for the king. Okay, you can't save the bishop on E5. Don't. What's white going to do? Well, he can check, and if anything, black could probably take a draw, but he might be able to run his king, and I'll let the players figure that out. But black should be happy with a draw. You know, when you're black, you want to get a draw. You only want to get a win when white misplays his position. Okay, so let's back up. So black has a resource there. So what white has to do is just take. Now this is another good point to pause the video. Black to play and do the best he can. How does black hold on? Okay, you've resumed the video. Well, one drawback with a move like F6 is that it just creates more exchanges, and white wasn't threatening to chase the king out yet. But the resource that black missed was queen E6, and it's got a point to it. The point is, if rook H3, we get the queens off, and when the queens are off, the black has survived the attack. And now it comes at a price. As I was saying before, if black gets to this ending, he's got great winning chances, and he's probably winning. But this kind of gives away a lot of the winning chances, but doesn't mean that black's now going to lose. Now those pawns aren't as weak as they look. White's going to have some trouble assaulting him. He's still a long way from doing it. And, you know, hey, these guys never even got in play the whole game. White gave odds of a rook and a bishop and won. Oh well. You don't expect to get away with it too often, guys. But let's just evaluate this. Okay, white now has a passed pawn for what it's worth, but it's his only without any development behind. Black's going to be fine. He's going to get some counter on that pawn, and he can blockade it. And if black blockades that pawn, ideally he'd like his knight on E6, and if he gets the pawn or even E7, it's blockading. The knight on E7 will blockade the pawn, and it'll secure G6. And it's not going to be clear exactly how white's going to proceed. Let's just play some fantasy chess here and decide how this is going to go. Okay. Well, we got to get this developed. So let's put it on G5. If anything, that takes away E7 from the knight. Okay. Well, let's go there. Knight D5 is perfectly logical. It takes away the open file from white. White's not going to penetrate on the D file. Okay, how does white continue? He doesn't have time for F4. It's going to throw the pawn away. Do you want to secure that pawn? Okay, rook F1. Well, let's just park the rook here. Now we're threatening that pawn. How's white going to deal with that? Whoops. He's going to have to play F5, right? Now we can play. Now we can't play knight E3. I want to get the knight to F5. That's an ideal square for it. Let's just go ahead and play there. How's white going to make any progress here? He's not going to make it on the king side. He's not. There's no way, shape, and form. And if white takes this off, black's got to be fine here. Black can't be losing this. There's always going to be counterplay on F4. Even if we have to give up G6, and this passed pawn alone is not enough for white to win. Okay, it's not. So this wasn't a forced line. I call these offshoot lines fantasy chess, just to fantasize what could happen if we went into this one line out of the multitude of lines that exist. just to show some general principles. Black had nothing to fear from this. So it takes away Black's winning chances, but Black was always a couple tempos behind, and we have to give credit for White for keeping the pressure on and eventually forcing a potential Black to find the drawing line. But he didn't find it, and that's how we win and lose games. If we didn't make these mistakes, we'd all be world champion, right? And as I said way back in the beginning when I started doing the guruing for 45 League, Team 4545 League, that without a mistake, there's no brilliancy, because it takes a mistake of some kind to create a brilliancy, and Black made his mistake by pushing G6 in the end, and White had his brilliant little sacrifice that led to a quick checkmate. Okay, extremely instructive game. I give both players credit for playing it very well. Unfortunately, someone's going to come up short a lot of times in these games, and that's what makes this kind of amateur chess interesting and hopefully instructive that you can learn from. I want to thank everyone for taking the time, and we look forward to making another video soon. Take care.